Hi, everybody. It is Monday. It is 1:07. I'm a little bit late today. And this is Pirkei Avot, History and Ashkafa, brought to you by the Tel Aviv International Synagogue under the inspired leadership of Rabbi Ariel Constantine. We are in the middle of discussing a Mishnah, a long and involved Mishnah in the third chapter of, I'm going to check this, okay. A long and involved Mishnah in the third parak of Pirkei Avot. I'm going to read it through again, although we're just going to focus in on one strophe of the Mishnah. And for this, we need these. Look at this. Rabbi Lezer Modai Omer was warned to say, "Hamachalel the Kodashim, person who desecrates sancta, things that are sacred, something we spoke about. V'mevazeh et hamoadot, and people who make light of or humiliate or insult sacred times or holidays. V'malbin pnei chaveiro barabim, the person humiliates his fellow in public. V'mefer brito shel Avraham Avinu alav shalom, or a person who undoes or violates the covenant of our father Abraham, may he rest in peace. V'megale panim b'Torah shelo k'halacha, or a person who interprets the Torah improperly. Afal pi sheyesh biyado Torah u'masim tovim, even if he's a scholar and he has good deeds to his name or to his credit, he has no place in the world to come. What we're up to is the line Hamalbin Penei Chaveiro Barabim, a person who insults or humiliates another person to the point where he turns white. People, sometimes you get so humiliated, so upset that you literally turn white, you turn pale. Strikingly, it's interesting. We have three different ways of expressing the same kind of experience. You can blacken a person's reputation, mashchir pnei chaveiro. You can actually be malbin pnei chaveiro. You can have your face turn white from embarrassment, or you can also have to cause a person to be masmik, to turn red. Generally, the idea you find in Chazal, especially, that the idea that what happens is that first a person turns red when they're insulted, and then afterwards they turn pale. That's really the extreme situation. And why is that? And what's wrong with that? So the Gemara says in Bava Metzia that a person who humiliates somebody else in public, it's as if he murdered him. Why? What's the connection? The connection is if the blood drains from your face, then it's as if it's a form of death, because when a person dies, the blood sort of pulls back and collects elsewhere in the body. And certainly, we've all been in a situation. We say it all the time. I was in that situation. It was so uncomfortable. I wanted to die, or I could have died, because it's so uncomfortable. You just didn't want to. Be there. So it's a simple. On the face of it, simple statement. Don't humiliate other people. The question is, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? And what is the difference between saying something which might offend a person, which may offend a person, or saying something which does that mean you can't have any discourse with another person because you might offend them? You shouldn't, possibly offend them, but you can't live, as opposed to the contemporary idea that you can't say anything to make a person feel bad. I mean, you can't have a forceful discussion with another person without even unintentionally. I think you're wrong. Well, I get defensive. But what if I am wrong? There is a mitzvah of tochacha. There's a mitzvah of rebuke if somebody else is doing something wrong. then you have to properly and respectfully say, what you're doing isn't right. But there's no way of avoiding, if the person was really wrong. There's no way of avoiding that. So it's a very thin line between what the Torah prohibits and what is part of daily discourse. In fact, in the case of tochacha, in case of rebuke, which needs a separate shiur or a series of shiurim, where the Torah actually mandates it. What I think there are two issues involved with. There were two issues involved. No, what do I do with the book? Oh, here it is. There are two issues involved that I want to mention just in passing, and this is going to be a shorter shiur than usual. Number one, one of the reasons that the Torah compares the shaming of a person, humiliating a person, so he turns white, to murder, is because there isn't the underlying guiding principle of interpersonal relations is actually not as much a commandment, or is not based on the awareness of one's requirement to be decent to other people, as a matter of relations with God. Why do I say that? Because as a friend of mine, Rabbi Professor Moshe Berger of Cleveland, Ohio, always used to point out when we were in touch. I mean, I've been living here for 30 years, so obviously I haven't seen him that much. He lives in Cleveland. That you should treat every single person, Jew and non-Jew, doesn't matter, as if out of the awareness that they were created in the image of God. That being the case, when one honors or respects or is deference or deferential to or respectful of or careful of or sensitive to the needs of another person, you are actually rendering homage not just to that person, giving the respect that is they are due, but also that you are actually giving respect to God. So therefore, I think that's one of the reasons why Elo Chelik Olam Haba. The other things in this list are all ritual items. So what is this rule doing in the middle of it? And the answer seems to be because there are two dimensions of the way we interact with people. Because people deserve respect on their own, and also but that respect ultimately derives from the fact that people are created in the image of God. Now, as it happens, I mean, I just had an exchange which bore this out, unfortunately. Which brings us to the internet. One of the really most serious moral deficiencies or moral problems which are raised by interaction especially social media, is due to the fact that when we interact with other people, we're interacting with a screen. There's no one in front of us, even though there's someone on the other side of the screen, behind their own keyboard. The fact that we don't see the other person, whether we don't talk to them on the phone or whatever the case might be, takes away our sensitivity to and awareness of the fact that that the person that we are interacting with was created in the image of God and therefore deserves respect. Now, this was discussed at length in a wonderful book which I highly recommend. It was by Rabbi Daniel Z. Feldman. Rabbi Feldman is a Rosh Hashiva at Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary at YU. The book is called False Facts and True Rumors, Lashon Hara in Contemporary Culture. It's a very well done, very well researched book, not just from a halachic point of view. He really did his homework in terms of the literature that had, at least until it was published. It was first published in 2015. But the trend, I think the points that he makes, it's really not possible to. They didn't change in the 7 years since, or 8 years since he wrote it. He really, in Hebrew you say chash. He plowed through. He really went through the entire literature and psychological literature regarding the internet and internet type exchanges, and in terms of what kind of psychological and moral issues are raised by the net. So this is one of them. And he calls it the online disinhibition effect. In other words, there were things that you would say to a person that you might end up saying it to a person out of anger or out of bitterness or out of flippancy, because you're only talking to a screen, that you would never say to a person's face. Um, and not only that, but but it doesn't mean it's less hurtful. It can be terribly hurtful. On the contrary, because there were no inhibitions, the person who gets the full weight of another person's meanness can take it way out of proportion in terms of even the intentions of the person originated the statement. I mean, look at let's take easy examples. You send a WhatsApp message, you send an email, and you just say something, but there's no intonation. There's no you don't know how it was said. The choice of words when you're writing fast is really very poor, and you can really do a tremendous amount of damage to another person. We know that there's a certain amount of etiquette involved in writing emails and writing WhatsApps. So, for example, everybody knows, or apparently everybody should know, that if you write in capitals, then that is screaming at a person. Now, I have a friend who always writes in capitals, and whenever I get an email from her, like I feel like I've been hit in the head or hit in the heart because. So I always write back. So why are you always writing to me in capitals? So she says, so I always write back. Well, that's how she knows how to type. So it's not like whatever. But no matter what, even though I've had this exchange with her a number of times, and I ask her, please try to use lowercase when you can. It doesn't take away the sort of like that first blaze of anger or screaming, which we're accustomed to experience. But the fact that there's no Tselem Elokim with whom you're interacting is really bad, both for the person who's accepting and for the person the person who's the object, but also for the person who's writing or who's commenting. Interestingly, he quotes a Dr. Elias Abu Jadoud in a book, Virtually You, The Dangerous Powers of the E-Personality, the electronic personality. I'm just going to read a little bit from page 199. He says, anonymity, or even just the distance, can make it possible for people to convince themselves that these online behaviors aren't me at all, writes writer, university psychologist Dr. John Suler. If they aren't me, it follows they don't reflect on me, and that I'm not responsible for their consequences. This gives us carte blanche to engage in them with more abandon. However, and as anyone who's ever sent an impulsive email or text to a boss, colleague, or friend will agree, lack of anonymity hardly protects us from disinhibited actions. Some of our most regrettable online gaffes carry our proud signatures at the bottom of the page. Like anonymity, being invisible also encourages online disinhibition. Being out of sight facilitates problematic actions, not to mention all sorts of outpourings over email, on blogs, and text messages, and in chat rooms. So we live in a world. So here, on the one hand, we have Rebbe Lezer Modai, who is admonishing us to make sure that we don't overdo it when we interact directly with other people, and that we realize that if we go too far, that we really have committed a form of murder. By the way, halachically, humiliation has halachic status. In other words, the Torah says in two cases. First of all, if you hurt somebody, one of the things for which you pay is boshet. Excuse me. In other words, humiliation. We would call it pain and suffering, but not physical pain and suffering. If I do something to somebody else and they lose an eye, or they have to, they're going to miss out on something that they want to do, or they have to walk around with a cat if they can't, we cause them emotional pain. That is something that's a tangible form of harm for which we are responsible and for which we have to pay damages. Similarly, there's a very interesting argument, a very interesting machloket among the Tanaim, as to whether there's penal double jeopardy. What do I mean? Can you, if a person commits one crime, but that one crime actually generates both a monetary obligation to pay for damages and some kind of physical, what shall I say, punishment. So do you do both? And so the Torah says no. Kamle b'derabamine, an expression that maybe some of you might have heard of, that you always take the more serious punishment and you let the person off of the lesser one. So if you I don't know, if you were Michal Shabbos, or I say you killed somebody, say you threw an arrow, or you shot, you took a rifle, and you shot a person through a window, and you killed him. So you have both broken a window and you have killed somebody. So you are responsible for the murder or the manslaughter, whatever the case might be, but you're not responsible for the window because you're already getting punished by a more serious way. So damages halachically damages and capital punishment are two different areas of halacha. What happens if, or in all cases, where a person, let's say a person, say you hit your parent and you drew blood, and that's a capital crime. What would happen if the witnesses told you, they didn't mention the fact that it was a capital crime, but they said that it's a prohibition from the Torah, and if you violate a prohibition from the Torah, so you actually can get whipped. So they only mention whipping. So under those circumstances, would you allow the person to be whipped or not? So this is an argument among the rabbis whether that's true or not. But what's striking is that opinion that holds, or that maintains, that you can actually do that, even though there's a more serious punishment that might be invoked. Is the reason is because when a person is publicly whipped, they are humiliated, and humiliation is a form of death, because you want to die by being humiliated. Like putting you in the stocks in the old Boston Bay, in the old Massachusetts Bay Colony. Coming back to over here, so therefore, you're not allowed to, you have to be careful of the fact, and always aware of the fact that that you are dealing with a Tzelem Elokim, with a person created in the image of God, when one interacts on the web. It's not easy, because generally, as I said, to see another person and watch their face turn white is one thing, but you have no idea. If you're shooting in the dark, you don't feel what you're doing, and that is a very dangerous thing. People have to realize that their actions have consequences. Okay, with that, we end today, and we will see you next